guys, it's Casey from Guys If I Win, and we're going to be coming at you guys with a deck tech for the American Midrange video. So first thing we're going to do is we're going to go over the land base. So first off, we have 4 hollowed fountains. We also have 4 steam vents. And then we have 4 sacred foundries. So we have the full Shockland package. This deck is actually running less lands than American Midrange or American Control, as this could also be considered usually run. We're going to be running 24, but you want to have the full Shockland so that you make sure all of your M10, I believe, is when they first came out, the Shockland, or not the Shockland, sorry, the tap lands like Glacial Fortress and stuff like that. So we have Glacial Fortress, that's 4 of. And then the other 2 sets of lands are actually from Innistrad, but they're the same. They do the same thing. They're just the enemy colors. So then we have 4 Sulphur Falls. We have 2 Clifftop Retreats. And we have 1 Plains. Oh, and then and we also have 1 Desolate Lighthouse. So Desolate Lighthouse is our only utility land. It's really nice when the game's going kind of slow, or say your opponent has a Sire of Insanity and you have no cards in hand, then you draw for turn, then you can activate Lighthouse, and you're drawing 2 and choosing one of those cards, hopefully something to deal with Sire, because Sire is a huge pain against, huge pain. You don't want Sire. Sire is bad against you. So there's the land base. So we're running 24 lands. Generally this deck runs 25 or 26, and the more control-y versions can run up to 27. So now we're going to go in the non-creature spells. So first thing we have is 3 Pillar Flames. This is a huge nod towards Voice of Resurgence. Voice of Resurgence is just ugly. You don't want to play against Voice of Resurgence. And with Junk Aristocrats being as big as it's been getting right now, Voice of Resurgence has been being used a lot in. You just want to make sure it's exiled. You don't want them getting any tokens because they're just going to get big and dumb. And then next we have 2 Think Twices. So these are just you didn't want any more cards in the deck, so you want to use them as cantrips so that you make sure that when you have cards, you want to just replace it with other better cards, but you didn't want to throw in, say, more lands because you don't want to get land flooded. When, say, Think Twice, you can play it and draw into a land, or you could draw into something good. It keeps the cards flowing. It makes it easier to get to your better stuff. Then we have 3 Azorius Charms. Pretty often you'll just use this to draw a card. While that's getting really into it, that's the weakest form, but in this deck it does a lot, because you would rather run Azorius Charms than Think Twices, because while it doesn't have flashback, in bad cases, say they have like a Champion of the Parish or like an Experiment 1, something that's getting a lot of counters, also Olivia, being able to put it on top of their library and make them have to draw this, it basically puts them back a card because they have to draw what was already on the field again. And sometimes lifelink can be relevant. That all depends on like how far behind you are and if you actually have some good creatures. Now, then next we have 2 Render Silence. Most people are choosing to run Dissipate in this spot, but I choose to run Render Silent because the mana base isn't that hard, and the deck in general, it doesn't have a bad matchup against Junkrites, so the Dissipate being able to exile it isn't that relevant. Because, I mean, if it's exiled or not, it does make a difference. But since you can deal with the deck fairly well, you don't need to worry about it too much. And Render Silent, a lot of times, decks that realize what they're playing against, they'll be like, against American Midrange, watch out for counters. But if you do Render Silent, when they try and bait your counter spell, you can Render Silent, and then it still puts them back a turn because they can't cast spells. I mean, if they can't cast anything, there's not a whole lot they can do. Then next we have 3 War Leaders Helix, which is just amazing. Most Planeswalkers, they play it, and then they'll use their ability because they have priority, and they'll just War Leaders Helix it, and most of the time it'll die. It takes pretty good care of Thragtusk, though there's some other things in the deck, such as Turn and Burn, that do it better. For the most part, Warlady's Helix, 4 toughness is a pretty relevant thing for things like Restoration Angel, Olivia after its ping stuff once, Huntmaster Flip. There's just a lot of things that the 4 gets, that the 4 is really important for over the 3 from Lightning Helix. Obviously, Lightning Helix is better because, I mean, it costs 2 less and it only does 1 less and gains you 1 less. But I mean, it's still, Warlady's Helix is amazing right now. Supreme Verdict for the more aggressive decks. When you're playing, say, Gruul Aggro or Naya Blitz, hitting a turn 4 Supreme Verdict can be huge. It takes away all their momentum. And I mean, even against Jund, I have had this do wonders against Jund. You would think you can just 1-for-1 their creatures. And honestly, I've had Supreme Verdict have some amazing 1-for-1s. I have killed like a 7/7 Olivia, and I mean, it costs 4, yes, but I mean, even as a 4, or costing 4, it's still pretty nice. I mean, being able to do it in general is just, wiping the board can be good, and after, say, they get some tokens from Huntmaster, or Garruk's been out for a while, and you finally get rid of it, then you want a board wipe, it does wonders. And then 3 Turn and Burn. Turn and Burn is extremely good. Being able to turn one thing and burn another thing can be extremely relevant. Turning and burning an Angel of Serenity is amazing, because there's not a whole lot of things that kill Angel of Serenity. I mean, you have Tragic Slip when something's died, you have Dreadbore, Putrefy, stuff like that. But turning and burning, if they say they targeted 3 things in their graveyard, they don't get them back, because Angel states that when it dies, the cards that it's exiled return to their owner's hand. But since you turn it, it doesn't have any abilities, so that ability isn't there when it dies, so they just stay permanently exiled. Now, if they have your own things, sometimes you don't want that to happen, but you're also getting rid of a 5/6 flyer. And then Thragtusk is another really good use for Turn and Burn. Because it kills it, and they don't get their beast. So I mean, it means that they won't have an attacker behind. Assemble the Legion, we have one of, Slaughter Games does a lot to this deck, because when you play against this deck, there's so many things you want to Slaughter Games, but running one of win conditions makes it so much harder to get rid of them. A lot of time, Appetite for Brains, if they put that in from the board, Appetite for Brains will get Assemble the Legion, because you don't want that to happen, but I mean, it just gets out of hand really fast, especially against the control matchup. Staff of Nin, it's really nice to be able to draw 2 cards a turn, and it keeps a lot of Planeswalkers in check. Any Planeswalker that +1s for its most common ability, the up ability, it just makes that to where it doesn't go anywhere. You can, they +1 and you deal damage to it, and then it doesn't get any higher, so they can't use any abilities that they couldn't use before, and eventually it makes it a lot easier to kill because you can add 1 damage. Blasphemous Act, sometimes it's just a board wipe. It can just be a board wipe, and that's the worst case with it. But Reckoner, Boros Reckoner, with Blasphemous Act out. At one point, I have had 3 Reckoners out and Blasphemous Acted. And redirecting 39 to someone's face is really good. But if they have their own Reckoner out and you're at 13 or less, you don't want to do it. You take the damage first. I can't exactly explain the rules, but I have looked into it. And if they also have a Reckoner and then you use your own Blasphemous Act, they get to redirect the damage first. So I mean, it can win games, and sometimes it can board wipe, and that can also win games. But overall, it's just really good, usually for comboing. And then 3 Sphinx's Revelation. Ridiculous. This is what they're usually going to Slaughter Games. Slaughter Games and Sphinx's Revelation is really good, because I mean, it's cards and life. But I mean, overall, it's just ridiculous. you get later into the game and you just have a ton of mana and you can draw ridiculous amounts of cards, and there's just not a whole lot they can do. You have too many answers in your hand for them to be able to get a threat and win. And then onto the creatures. Snapcaster, we have 2 Snapcasters. You can also opt to run 3 or sometimes even 4, depending on how spell heavy you're running. But we choose to run 2 in here because we have a lot of spells that are good to give flashback until end of turn. But since we're low on mana, because we wanted to be able to run some extra cards that are really good in this, they're really good in the deck, it's nice to be able to make up for some cards if you don't need the lands. So the Snapcaster, it has a lot of good targets. Sometimes you can flashback a Sphinx's Revelation and it can still be huge. A really good thing is getting turn or burn, because you can have a ton of combat tricks, flash things in, block with Snapcaster. So you can Snapcaster and turn something, and it kills whatever it blocks if you turn what it's blocking. So I mean, it's 5 mana and it kills something and gets you a Snapcaster on the field. That can kill some pretty big things. So Snapcaster overall, it just has a lot of good targets and does a lot of work. And then Boros Reckoner. We have 4 Boros Reckoners. Reckoner stops the aggressive deck in its tracks. They swing in, Reckoner kills a few things because it blocks something and kills it and then redirects damage and kills something. Sometimes they won't even attack until they can deal with Reckoner. I've had that happen a few times because it just wipes their board if they attack into Reckoner. And then, as we talked about earlier, Blasphemous Acting with Reckoner is ridiculous. It will usually win the game. Overall, Reckoner is just really good. Its ability is extremely strong, and it does a lot of good things. And then, while it doesn't have an enter the battlefield, sometimes it can work really well with Restoration Angel. Because, say you swing with the Boros Reckoner, and then they're like, oh, you're tapped, all your creatures are tapped, then you can flash an Arresto and have a Resto and a Boros Reckoner to block with, and say they have 3 creatures. I'm most likely in the aggressive deck, they're going to have 3 or less toughness. So you can block, and the Restoration Angel does the 3 that it needs to kill something. The Boros Reckoner does the 3 that it needs to kill something, and it can redirect damage to kill something else. So that's another really good way to wipe a board. And the final card in the deck is Aetherling. Aetherling, if you can stabilize on board, it just wins. Like, there's just nothing they can do about it. If you have a few extra lands, they can try and kill it, you can blink it. As long as you can blink it as many times as they can try and kill it, I mean, it's over, because you can swing for 8 every turn, make it unblockable. Okay, so that about wraps it up for this deck tech. I have a nice day, and have some... edit this? What do we do for the outro?
Bye, guys.
Yeah,
subscribe and like the video. Leave a comment on things we can do better or change, and advice. Alright, see you later.